meeting of the Granville Junction Village School District Board of Education. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take the roll, please, Mike.
Dr. Cronin?
Here.
Ms. Deeds?
Here.
Mr. Jennings?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here. Okay, we have an action item, approval of the resolution to contract with Amoresco for the energy efficiency project.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments you'd like to make about it, or?
We've talked a lot about this project. I think what we have in front of you is a total $2 million project that includes LED lighting, controls and building automation, the high school boiler, intermediate school boiler, and the GIS roof. And we have secured funding, which is the next action item. Obviously, we talked a lot about the LED portion of this project and the specific return on investment of that item. And we've collected more information, distributed that to the board members, and it is really in your hands now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I'm sure that I will.
We talked about potentially breaking out the LED lighting portion from the boilers and roof, which are more essential, as well as with the controls, which are shorter payback. Does that kind of come back as an alternative for us, or is that something that we should discuss, or where does that stand just in terms of potentially approving something different than what the full
We
package is?
outlined, by we, I mean Mr. Sobel, outlined two options and a phase one and a phase two of the potential plans. If you looked at the phase two option, or option two, phase one, where we eliminated the LED portion from the total project.
Which includes eliminating the lighting controls.
Yes. We would basically break even after the 15-year project or funding mechanism. Option one, we were ahead $220,000. So it wasn't necessarily accelerating the return on investment or saving the district any more money. Phase two was including the boilers and the LED project.
No,
No,
the
the boilers
phase two
were
is
phase
the LED, both the LED and the lighting controls.
Yes, okay.
In
In
3 years. In
3 years, okay.
Which is frankly an arbitrary number, but it was,
Right.
the discussions, 3 years seemed to come
And
up.
built backwards from that 220 savings.
And yes, built backwards so that it saved $220,000 over the life of that project and how many years it would take to bring back the $220,000, which I determined to be 9 years. With the certain assumption, with the series of assumptions that were made.
Okay. I guess I was the biggest stick in the mud last week, so I should kind of just reframe my thoughts since I've had a chance to look into this a lot more detail and really understand a little bit the numbers behind it and things like that. And kind of start with background, I'm like a huge proponent of technology, right? That's like one of my huge things, to increase efficiency and use new technology for great experiences, right? So I'm all about new technology, but there's a cost to it for sure. And so that's why we need to be really careful with, good engineering and business case analysis and so forth. And when I saw the, $50,000 payback in electricity, which is kind of an 18-year payback, it really raised a red flag for me, right? So it seems like that's a really long payback. Now, it happens that there's also some savings that could be realized through operations and maintenance, you know, so potentially changing bulbs and fixtures less often. So that could bring the payback down to 13 years if it's fully realized roughly, which is a lot better. So that's fantastic. I still think it's very long for the kind of money that you're spending and the status of the technology. But I did a lot of looking at, you know, specifically the numbers and looking into the details. And I know that Amoresco, with the support of Go Sustainable, and Tanya led a great engineering analysis, and they did a good job. They really did a lot of thorough work in our schools, you know, specifically measuring, you know, lighting and energy usage, and they've come up with great solutions for, you know, fantastic improvements in the first half, which is the boilers and the HVAC controls. I mean, the fact that we can put controls in place that have a 3-year payback is outstanding. That's something that we should kick off right away. And the same with the boilers, right? The boilers might not have a payback, but if we don't do it, we're going to be cold, right? So there's real educational value to the boilers and even the roof, right? So those are things that I'm really supportive of. But, you know, I really question the LED lighting because it's a relatively new technology, right? And I went out and I found some information that suggests that the cost of LED lighting will continue to come down significantly, right? We've heard that, you know, a couple of years ago, LED lights were twice as expensive to install, right, than they are now, which suggests to me maybe we're headed on a trend, right? And I found some data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration that specifically helps public organizations make these kinds of decisions that shows that the cost of LED lighting is projected to continue to go down significantly. Right, and that's where I kind of kicked my fox and said, hey, what if we just wait a couple years and install this at some future date? And the same with the efficiency of the bulbs themselves will likely increase significantly. So we'll get a lot more light for the same number of watts if we use future technology than if we have it right now. And we talked with Go Sustainable as well, right? And I think they're a great resource with us and an impartial observer. And they, you know, concurred, and some of their comments were, you know, it is relatively new technology, and the price of installing it is the biggest concern. In new construction, it's something that's done. It makes a lot of sense. But where we are right now, I mean, the lights in our schools work well, right? And from an educational perspective, we meet all the standards and have great lights for the kids, right? So I really still just struggle with spending $1 million, right? And taking out all of the lights that we have and putting in all new lights with the hope and expectation that it breaks even at some point, you know, 13 or 18 years in the future, depending on costs, right? So that's kind of where I still am struggling with it. It's really looking at that technology, you know, can we wait a while? Can we wait? I mean, if we have operations and maintenance costs with our light bulbs going out and the ballasts on the fluorescent fixtures going out, can we replace them with high efficiency LEDs? It seems like if you do that over time, it makes a lot of sense. But if you have lights that work perfectly and our classrooms are lighted well, right, I struggle with like paying $1 million, right, and taking on that debt, even if it's going to break even at some point in the distant future, because I really don't know what it's going to be like in 13 years. I don't know what buildings we're going to be in. I don't know how we're going to shift things around. You know, if we end up changing all the lights in this building and having to find another home for this building, right, like we kind of lose out on that. And I'm not saying that we're not pretty comfortable and pretty certain we're going to have the schools we have and things like that, but still, it's just like a really long payback. And I can't really justify, as a community member, you know, investing with that kind of payback in a technology that's so new and we know is going to continue to get cheaper over time. So I guess that's kind of still my position. I think the engineering work is great. I think they've done a good job of it. I think they've come to us with a proposal, right? And it's our job on the behalf of the community to kind of look at that proposal and make decisions about, you know, where we want to invest, you know, our time and our money. And it's just, I'm struggling with understanding how this supports our mission, right? Because it doesn't really do much to change the educational value, right? And I struggle with the economics of it being such a long payback on a technology that's relatively new and continuing to evolve so much. So that's kind of where my head is still, and I'd love to continue the conversation because I've looked a lot more into it and so forth and hear thoughts otherwise.
Anybody?
Yeah, go ahead. I would just say that one of the things that I look at is the $220,000 net savings for the entire project. So we get to fund a roof, and 2 boilers, and do the LED lighting at a net savings to the district of $220,000. You know, possibly more if, you know, again, all of these things involve assumptions, right? And so even the phase 2 that Mike has done, you know, that's assuming that we can get funding for the project at 4%. Right now, we can lock it in at 2.5%. And there are also rebates going on that might not be available down the road. And so, I mean, there's lots of variables going on. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of, to me, it's kind of like you hedge your bets, right? So is it a good investment now to save, you know, $220,000 over the life of the project? You know, and knowing what it's going to be and locking in an interest rate of 2.5%, which is a great, you know, that's great, you know, funding for us. And so for me, I think that's the biggest number that I look at, is the overall savings and looking at the project as a whole.
You know, this is a good process. I'm glad we're thoroughly vetting this. I think, Jen, I agree with you in terms of locking in savings and, you know, trying to not. I remember one thing I learned early on. Somebody told me you can't be smarter than the market, and people ask me all the time where interest rates are going, and if I knew that, I would, you know, I wouldn't be working. I'd be doing something else. But to me, there's an opportunity to do something that I think makes sense. The LEDs, I would agree with Thomas. You know, they're like any other technology. I would assume that they will get better and probably less expensive as we go. Although I'm interested that Ameresco, and I appreciate very much the responsiveness that you folks have demonstrated. It's been terrific, as well as the district staff, Tanya and Mike and others, Tina. You guys have turned this around very quickly. But I noted 2 things in the memo that came from Ameresco and responsive to questions that we asked last week. One is, what's the availability of the fluorescent light bulbs that we utilize now? And it seems like they're starting, according to the memo, starting to be produced less actively or less frequently here. So assuming we can continue to get them, I would presume that there's a little bit of commodity pricing that's attached to those as well, and so that price may go up. And then in terms of a price drop on the LEDs, I know based on your experience, you're projecting that most of the price savings have already been realized in the market, and there may or may not be significant savings left. I think you probably would think there isn't, and I don't know. You know, we're guessing about whether there is a savings or not. So I look at this and I think, you know, we know we're going to go to LEDs at some point. And whether we do them now or whether we do them 3 years from now on the view that we might save some money, we're going to do them. We know several things. We can borrow at an extraordinarily historically low rate right now. We know that we might be able to do this less expensively later. But in the one area I would I think distinguish what Thomas said, the $1 million, the $978,000, $972,000 that's on the line item for the lighting is not just for the lights, right? It's for the controls, it's for labor and it's fixtures, it's for labor and installation. And so I noticed in one of the breakdowns here, there's a line item, LED retrofit and controls, $344,000, and then labor and installation, $375,000. And so presumably if we don't do the lights and we separate them out, those numbers come down, but I don't think it's net $1 million or $972,000 savings. I think that $972,000 number is inclusive of the controls and the labor and materials. So assuming that we said we wanted to try and save money and not do the lights, but we wanted to do the controls now, that reduces that $972,000 savings by some amount. I don't know how much, but by some amount. It's not apples to apples, but I know we do things, and in my world, and like you, Thomas, I come to look at things for what's the payback. And, in the private sector, you look at something along the lines of a 7-year payback. If you're doing a capital improvement and you're going to lock in historically low rates and you have a technology that's going to last for a long period of time, I would posit that the payback can be longer. I just don't know what that right number is, but that's, at least historically, I don't think that's the only thing we use to evaluate when we do things. We wouldn't have done the land lab if we did it on a payback basis. Now, that's different, and you make that point, Thomas, that has a direct educational perspective, but I'm inclined to believe that we're going to do this, the LED portion of the project, sooner if not later. And I look at it as an all-encompassing opportunity to finance things that we absolutely have to have right now, with the high school boiler in particular, the GIS roof in particular, and the package, if you will, of the entire project generates a payback and a savings that makes sense to me. I wish we could say there was a 5-year payback on this, but we can't. And I don't think 3 years from now we'll be able to say there's a 5 or 7 year payback either. Comment that Mike made at the top of the meeting, and I wasn't sure what he made it, that I understood it, and I may not still, but I think what you're saying is something along the lines of there's about a 9-year payback on the lights.
That was what we were talking earlier. Yeah.
On the lights.
Basically,
Yeah.
with the assumptions that I made, to do phase 2 of option 2, which is assuming that the materials costs go down by 50% between now and 3 years from now, and the energy efficiency goes up by 60%, and the interest rate is 4% instead of 2.5%, and the labor costs go up at essentially the rate of the GDP deflator at 1.5%. And I also, on the other side, assume that the energy savings increase by 3% a year as Ameresco did. And what I came out with was it would take essentially we would have to do a 9-year loan, assuming we can get the financing in place, a 9-year loan to realize the same $220,000 of net savings that we're realizing here over 15 years. And to me...
And at that point, it's a net equal savings, right?
Correct.
If we can get a 4% loan 3 years from now, then, and those other assumptions are correct, then actually it's a little better, right? Because 3 years from now, it pays off in 9 years. Well, that's
Correct.
12 years, it's about the same.
It would be, essentially, it would be 12 years down we'd be 12 years down the road. Yes, we do realize the net $220,000 savings 3 years quicker than in this proposal. But when you look at the variables that go into the estimates, what if the price doesn't come down 50%? What if it comes down 25%? If the savings, instead of going up by 60%, are only 30%, and that 9 years maybe becomes 10 years, maybe becomes 11 years. And honestly, what I told you guys earlier when we were talking, if the payback had come out to 5 years, I probably would have been with you. You're talking 5, and if all my assumptions were wrong, so instead of 5 years, it was 7 or 8 years, you're still 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead. But because it came out to 9 years when I did all that.
But 9 years is just as good.
Hmm?
9 years is just as good as our 15-year deal now, though, right?
Well, except it's
Assuming.
12 years, because it's 9 years, 3 years down the road.
Okay.
So it is 12.
So it's
yeah.
better than that.
It is a
12-year
little
option.
bit better,
So it's better to
but.
start out like that with your
it-
assumptions of 4% interest. right?
Correct, it is better, but, this kind of gets back to the discussion that we had when we refunded all the bonds. When was the right time to do it? And, we realized when we pulled the trigger, that we could have possibly saved a little more than we did. But the risk of waiting 4 months with the concern about interest rates, we decided, we knew we had a good amount of savings. We were doing what we needed to do, and we decided to do it, and we're hedging our bet against what could go wrong. I think here, you're really doing the same thing. Again, if we could look at this and say that if we waited 3 years, we'd get 5 years on the LEDs, and the 3 years current, it's 8 years now instead of 15. Yeah, that's a little bit more appealing, but when it became 9 years on top of 3, to me, that says, okay, it's probably the right time to pull the trigger on the whole thing. Because of, when you look at what may happen with the different assumptions I had to make to come up with the 9 years, and, they could be wrong in either direction.
Mhm.
Absolutely. They could, but the risk that it's wrong in the one direction where it pushes it out from 9 years to 10 or 11, is it really worth waiting that long and taking those risks where you may end up in the same spot as if we just went ahead and did it now? And so why not just go ahead and pull the trigger and do the project now? And that's kind of where my thinking kind of evolved on that.
No, I would just echo everything Russ said, who says things 100 times better than I ever would. So I agree with that. But I would also hate to see us shy away from innovation in technology because of cost. I don't know if next year the computers need to be redone and we shy away from that because there'll be a new computer in 2 years that is going to be cheaper and better. I wouldn't want to see monorails connecting all the schools or something like that. Like, that's crazy, right? But with the support of the treasurer and the school administration saying that this is the plan, I'm all for it. I think it'll be great.
I think the most persuasive thing to me is that Mike has run the numbers and is recommending it. And Jeff, of course.
I'm secondary, I get it.
I know. But I appreciate that everyone did take the time to step back and re-examine and come with options, but also with a solid recommendation and an explanation of that recommendation. That to me was persuasive.
I think it's going to be really hard for me to explain to anybody why the board supports this, right? Because I think as opposed to computers and technology, I mean, that's all educational value. I mean, we have like perfectly good lighting in the schools. As a matter of fact, we put all new lighting in our schools 8 years ago, right? We pulled out all the old bulbs and put in new ones. And then just 4 years ago, pulled out the bulbs and put in new ones again, right? With the hopes of kind of long payback. But the paybacks were much shorter than this, right? And here you're talking about, 18 years payback based on the electricity savings, right? Maybe 13, depending on how you figure out the capital cost savings, right? Because it's not like we're going to spend that much less. We're still going to have maintenance guys, right? And relative to replacing fluorescent light bulbs, right? I mean, if our ballasts go out, we should replace them with LEDs, right? That's what you do when you're putting in a new fixture. And then if you're not putting in a new fixture, you're pulling out all the lights, right? You're going in, you're ripping them all out. They're perfectly good lights, and putting in something else that you kind of hope based on your bet hedging, right? Which is a bet hedging about interest rates and a bet hedging about technology of LEDs going down, right? I mean, the guidance we get is like, yeah, these prices are going to come down. I just don't think that's the business we need to be in, hedging bets on interest rates and technology progressing, right? I think that's a little too risky with the $972 million worth of public money that we're gonna be borrowing for this job, right? So I think there's.
Not thousand.
Thousand,
Not
thank you,
million.
thank you. I was gonna say a million first, but I corrected. So I think that's kind of where I struggle a little bit with it. I think they're gonna come down and cost a lot. I mean, the Energy Information Administration says that, so I have confidence that's gonna happen. I'm not sure if it's quite that same amount, right? And I'm not sure if interest rates are gonna jump up to 4% in 3 years or not, right? That's a risk always, right? But who knows, right? People have been saying interest rates have been going up for a long time, right? And that's hard to say. So I guess I'm not into hedging bets on things that we are not our core things, right? I'll hedge bets on educational processes, right? And I'll hedge bets on the fact that we can, educate kids better than everybody else and invest in whether it be technology for computers or new curriculum and things like that all day, because I have a lot of confidence there. Like, I just don't think, and based on the people I've spoken with, I talked with people at Holophane and Acuity Lighting about LEDs, that's what they do, right? And we talked to Go Sustainable, right? And they said, it's relatively new, right? And the price is the biggest concern, right? And it's such on the edge that I don't see that there's any disadvantage in going forward with the things that we need, right? Buying boilers and buying a roof, right? And buying controls for our HVAC systems that pay back very quickly, right? But when you need a boiler and a roof, don't go buy light bulbs. Like, it just doesn't quite compute to me why that's rolled in there. And I know there's a financing advantage to it, and you can kind of make the numbers of the payback look better because of the savings. But it's kind of scary long savings to me. Like, don't justify it based on that potential payback. Buy a boiler because you need to have a boiler, right? You don't buy, you need a boiler, buy a set of light bulbs. That doesn't seem like that works to me. So I'm still struggling with it. I see your kind of counterpoints, and I've looked into it a whole lot, and I guess I'm just not convinced that the payback is worthy and that we're the right ones to be hedging those bets on interest rates and technology that we don't quite understand.
I would say, hedging your bets is a bit, it's more what assumptions do you believe? And that's the problem with any forecasting that you do, right? The following assumptions. And so if you believe these assumptions are going to be correct, well then, that's the way you're more comfortable with it. I think the other side of it is if you're more comfortable with, can we do this project now at really good financing and at net savings to the district. And I think at one point, Mike, we talked about without the LED lighting in there, the project doesn't pay for itself. It's more of a, is that not?
That-
Cost.
Right, the project itself, without the LED lighting, does not pay for itself, because basically what's making it balance is that have been assuming all along we were going to be spending $40,000 a year to debt service the roof. And it needs that $40,000 to break the project even, where in the full project, even if you back out the roof from the whole project, it does pay for itself within 15 years.
And if you install LED lighting at some point in the future, it pays for itself, right?
Assuming-
Based on the
Yes.
assumptions that we have.
Based on the assumptions that we have.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That
Which
was the
again are-
interest rate
which
going
are-
up to 4%.
Right, which are assumptions.
But the rebates are going away, correct?
It's possible, right?
Yeah,
We
and
don't know for sure.
and in my forecast, I've assumed that there are no rebates.
I mean, it seems like if there's rebates now and it's a great interest rate now, just because something's on sale doesn't mean you should buy it, if you don't need it. Like, and we don't need new lights, they work fine, and they're actually not that
Well,
inefficient.
I think the only area that I would disagree with you is the board consistently challenges us to be as efficient as possible, okay? And that might take, this went through the Resources and Operations Committee because we have a benchmark that we're trying to get at $1.10 per square foot. So we've been consistently challenged. That's why we did a previous House Bill 264 project. I'm sure the lights at that time were working well. But in order to realize cost efficiency long-term, you made an investment to try and change that trajectory. So capital, I get where you're coming from the standpoint of, it never feels great to spend money on capital when you really could put it in the classroom. But they're not mutually exclusive, they're combined. They're part of our aggregate picture of funding what we are as an organization. So we have to do both. We can't just put all of our money in the classroom and let everything fall apart around us, okay? But I think in an effort to continue to try and be as cost-effective as possible, you know, we've proposed this scenario, which looks at, you know, controls, the boiler automation, boiler replacement, roof, and LED. So, I mean, we're already operating at a very high efficient level, and this is what was, you know, recommended by experts to say, hey, if you're going to try and be more cost effective, this is the way to go. So, you know, I agree. I would love to see the return on investment 5 years. Yeah, I wish I could say the return on the investment for a resource adoption was 5 years. Yeah,
That's
I know,
totally
I
different.
understand,
Right.
but it's the same argument that you're trying to make as far as putting money into, you know, the capital side of things instead of the classroom. I mean, they're both part of our mission.
Well, I think it's good to have a heater, right, and boilers and a roof, so the roofs don't leak, right? But if we have great lighting in the rooms that are efficient and are great at supporting the kids' educational perspective, right, there's no reason that our lights are not great, right? You know, risking, right, the $1 million for the payback potential, right? When we could wait and be more certain about that, right? Because we know a little bit more that we'll have a better return on investment in the future, or just replace the things when they go out, right? If the light bulb goes out, replace it with an efficient one, right? That seems to make a lot of sense to me, whereas pulling them out now and putting all new ones in with the 15-year return is not there.
Following that logic.
Okay.
You're saying that you think it's gonna be more cost effective that when a light burns out, we retrofit at that moment and put the LED? So every single time we're bringing out?
If you replace a ballast, that's probably true, right? And I don't know about the light bulbs, right? I mean, you probably have to work the light bulbs or something like that. But that's not the plan we had. With the plan
Right.
we have, which is actually more cost efficient, right, based on our assumptions, is to do the LED thing years from now when it's more efficient, right? So there's an economic benefit to putting, based on our analysis, there's an economic benefit to putting off the lighting and lighting controls portion of the project now, right? Because it will be better economically according to our analysis.
No,
Is that right?
It's a wash.
Or was it a wash at 4%?
Yeah.
You calculated the 4% based on a wash on the
Yeah.
Correct.
numbers?
Or it's basically financially, I set it up to be basically what, the idea was, what would it take
To get the same benefit.
to get the same net benefit as the full project at the end of the
And that's
the
where the
financing.
4% came up.
And that's, yeah, the 4% is part of what it took, yes, that was.
Several
the-
assumptions, yeah.
The final assumption, I mean, we made I made the 50% cost reduction assumption, the 60% energy efficiency assumption,
Yeah.
the basic cost of labor inflation
Mhm.
and energy as Amoresco did, and then, okay, that's where I got to. What does the interest rate need to be now to bring it to the same level? And that's what the 4% is.
Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, honestly, if it, again, the same thing, if it was gonna be 8%, that would have worried me.
Yeah.
But 4% as a historical interest rate 3 years from now, when we've now had historically low rates for, what, 7 years? Is, I don't think 4% is an unreasonable assumption. Could it be wrong? Okay, let me do that. Will it be wrong? Probably 98% sure, yes, it will be wrong.
Of course, forecasts always are.
But,
One
yeah,
way or
the
the other.
question is how wrong?
In which way?
And which way, and I don't think that there's a good hedge on which way or by how much.
Okay.
I think assuming that it's going to drop by 50% in cost is a fairly good assumption too.
It may be.
The folks at Amoresco don't think that's going to happen.
Well, but the U.S. Energy Information Administration thinks it is, right? This is an organization by our federal government to project lighting cost over time, right, to help public organizations make decisions, and that's where we came up with this number, right? So, I don't know if we know more than they do in terms of this cost, or if Amoresco knows more than they do, but this was just a public service thing that's out there. That's where we pulled these numbers from, right? And if you look at, like, people don't think that computers are gonna drop in cost by that much either, right? But LEDs are, you know, silicon-based technology, and look how much they've dropped in cost in the last couple of years. Like, they're half the price it was 2 years ago, right? I have trouble saying it's not gonna reduce anymore, right? And you know, so I just think about that curve, right? And I think, okay, if it's like a tenth the price it was 5 years ago, right? You know, LED lightings were just not a thing a few years ago. And now they're potentially, you know, gonna be a thing in the future, right? Right, so if you think about half the cost it was 2 years ago, I can't say that it's not gonna reduce anymore. Because, I mean, there's such a niche market right now, right? They're not that big of a market, but if 100% of manufacturing plants are making LED lightings instead of incandescents and fluorescents, the cost is gonna be a lot less, right? That's what happens with scale, right? You make a whole lot more of them and it becomes a whole lot cheaper, right? And now we're at the front end of that curve, because we're making a few of them and they're pretty good, but they're getting better all the time. So I think getting better over time is something we should expect from them.
Do you know when that graph was made?
This was a 2014 graph, right, that projects out to 2040. So, and that's the most recent information I
It shows the
can get.
costs have come down considerably over the last however number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're getting close to the bottom of the curve, but there's still some room to run.
It depends on how you define the bottom of the curve, right? So by this number, the dollars per installed kilowatt, is the cost of the lighting, right, is now, when this study was published, was 10, is now 8, and is forecast to go down to the same as LEDs in complex fluorescence, which is like 3, right? That asymptote doesn't happen for 10 years, right? But still, I mean, this says that, you know, 3 years from now, it'll be 50% the cost, and 10 years from now, it'll be 25% the cost, because 25% the cost is the same price as complex fluorescence and others, in terms of the bulb technologies, installation, and that kind of stuff. But the efficiency is going to continue to increase, and that's what these engineers do with, you know, silicone-type things. They increase the efficiency, they get more light out of the same thing, because there's a lot of development there.
But that
So-
projection is 2 years old.
That projection is 2 years old.
Can I ask Amoresco folks, and you may not have this number at hand, I don't know. So on the summary you gave us, the line item for LED retrofit and control material, number is $344,000. Is it fair to assume that 2/3 of that is in the lighting and 1/3 of that's in the controls? Am I in the neighborhood, or? I'm just trying to get an order of magnitude here.
Yeah, I don't have that breakout exactly, but yeah, I'd say that's a fair assumption.
Okay.
Controls being the occupancy sensors?
Okay. I'm not implying that that's what they should be, I'm just guessing, asking. So ostensibly, we're looking at $225,000, $250,000 or less probably for the lighting and the ballasts of that $344,000 number.
Well, we're actually eliminating the ballast altogether.
Okay.
Direct wire LEDs, so it's going to significantly cut their lighting equipment in half, thus taking away the 15-year
Okay.
accountability for volume equipment life well beyond the scope of this project.
So for a technical neophyte like me, though, I separate out controls versus the lights.
Yes.
The lights being the bulbs and whatever
Wiring.
wiring comes in that. So I'm $225,000, maybe $250,000 for the lights and the wiring, maybe less, I don't know, guess, right? So let's say it comes down 50% in 3 years. And, you know, the real number potentially is $100,000 to $125,000. And it may be more, it may be less, if we're making that assumption. You know, we could be off, but probably not wildly off. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, wildly off.
Yeah,
The
those
assumption?
guesses, yeah.
Yeah, we're all guessing. I mean, we're all guessing. But assuming that that's what the number is for for the lighting. Now, if it's 225 to 250, and there is a 50% savings 3 years from now, and then you're also assuming potentially a higher interest rate, but you're also assuming labor costs are higher. What I'm sensitive to, Thomas, I appreciate everything you're saying. You spent a lot of time on this, and I don't, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't agree with a lot of what you're saying. I do. But we're not talking about spending $1 million or not spending $1 million. We're talking about a technology that we believe, I think, unless I'm wrong, we believe we're going to at some point. We're going to get to that LED technology. Kicking, screaming, or willingly, we're going to get there because that's where lighting is going. And so perhaps by waiting 3 years, we might save that $100,000 to $150,000. We're not saving $1 million, is my point. And we're not spending $1 million now that we wouldn't spend later. In my business, I learned a long time ago from a very old Greek developer who told me, and pardon me, he said, you try and time the market, you lose your ass. More often than not. I don't know how to time the market. And I'm not in the lighting business. So I'm just concerned with, we're all making assumptions. I'm concerned with making an assumption that we're going to generate significant savings if we wait. I think there will be some savings. I agree with you. I think they will become less expensive. How much more, we don't know. But I'm assuming that top-end savings is $100,000 to $150,000, which is not nothing in our budget. And it's not nothing to the folks in this community. It is significant, and I think we're all very cognizant of our fiduciary responsibility to the community and to the children that we're here to serve. But if we know we're going to go to that technology at some point, I look at it and I say we can finance it now at a cost that is a reasonable cost at a historically low rate of interest that may or may not be available. We could wait 3 years and we may save some money, and it's not an insignificant, perhaps not an insignificant amount of money, but if it has to come down 50% or it'll be order of magnitude that much money. I don't see waiting to do that if we know we're going to do it. When we can, in effect, lock in savings now that I wish they were 8-year savings, but they're savings in a technology that we know we're going to use. I think I know what Mr. Brown was getting at in terms of replacing lights on a one-off basis. It's not going to be efficient for us. I don't like to throw out anything that's good, but sometimes we do things because we know we're getting better. So I'm in favor of doing this, and I don't view it as doing it because they're on sale now, or because they may be cheaper later. I think it is a reasonable thing to do now in terms of a comprehensive package to address the immediate needs that we have, and to lock in a technology that we believe we're going to utilize for a long period of time at a financing proposal that makes sense. And those aren't assumptions. Those are those are realities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm taking out the assumptions about whether we save or whether we don't, or where interest rates go, where they don't go. When I look at it is what can we do now? What can we do now makes sense to me.
Think we should take a vote? You take a roll, please, Mike?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Khan?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Next item is 4.02, the approval of the lease purchase agreement with Park National Bank to fund the energy project.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Amy and Andrew? Any discussion around the financing package?
You know, we just appreciate being able to do business locally.
For sure.
Yes.
Very much.
Pay for it.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deed,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Cornman.
Aye.
Move to adjourn.
There you go. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Ms. Deed,
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Khan.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Dr. Cornman.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Mr. Redding is having his land lab tour up there, so if you guys want to run up there.